All right, in this example here, we're going to conduct a little simulation of a situation, and that would be difficult to figure out the answer by hand, I guess. You're not going to use this very much in this particular unit, but we are going to do some of this later on in the course, so I thought I'd show it to you now because it fits in with this whole using Excel kind of thing. So here's the situation we're given. When writing a multiple choice test, you might have wondered, what are my chances of passing just by guessing? So suppose you make random guesses on a test with 10 questions, 10 multiple choice questions. Each one has a choice of 5 possible answers for you to choose from. We want to develop a way of simulating guessing on all of these questions. We want to run this simulation over and over and over, 100 times it says, and use the results to estimate the mark you're likely to get just by guessing and how likely you are to pass, or the number of times you might pass out of 100 times. And then we'll see if it's practical to run this simulation 1,000 times or more, because the more times we run the simulation, the better our results are going to be. So in Excel, I am going to set up a number of columns here that are going to represent the questions on the test. So I'm going to use column A for question 1, B for 2, C for 3, and so on. So I'm just going to number these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and there is our 10 questions. And I'm going to use column K here for your overall score. So just so that we know that these things are not values for our test, I'm just going to highlight them, I'm going to make them bold, make it a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to center the text here. So these are sort of the headings for these columns. And if I really wanted to, I guess I could underline everything as well. And there we are. Underneath these, I'm going to have each one of these rows is going to simulate one time taking the test. So each of these cells represents you randomly guessing on one question on the test. So we want to, in each of these cells, generate a random number that represents randomly guessing on these questions. So the command we're going to use is rand between, okay? R-A-N-D-B-E-T-W-E-E-N. And what rand between does is it generates a random number between any two numbers that I give it. And because we have 5 options on our test, we want to generate a random number between 1 and 5. Okay? So in this case, the question was 3. The number we generated was 3. And then we're just going to copy this to all of the other questions on our test. So I'm going to click on, sort of put my cursor over top of that little box down at the bottom, click down, and then drag across. And that fills in that same rand between command for each one of the questions on my test. So I would have guessed 5, option 1, option 3, option 2. So how are we going to know whether our guess is right or not? Well, we can just sort of assume that if they guess 1, that they got the answer correct, because these are all randomly generated guesses, so they're equally likely to guess 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So we can just assume that 1 corresponds to guessing the right number. So over here in our score column, I'm going to use another command called COUNTIF. So I'm going to hit equals because I'm using a formula in here. I'm going to type COUNTIF. And COUNTIF does kind of what it sounds like. If I give it a range of numbers, it counts a number if some certain criteria is true. So the range of numbers that I want to, I'm just going to hold on. The range of numbers that I want is this range here from all of these rand betweens that I just put in there, so from 1 up to 10. And the criteria we want to use is, so comma, then I want to count that if they guess a 1, because we're saying 1 corresponds to the correct answer. So I'm going to put quotation marks 1, close the quotation marks, and close the brackets, and then hit enter. Make this a little bit bigger here. Okay. So the command that we have in there, you can see it up here in the formula bar, COUNTIF, all of those things, if what we have in one of these cells is a number 1. And notice that each time I sort of change something, it updates my It basically changes all the numbers in there. So on this version of the test, we got a 1 because if we look across here, we only have 1, 1, so we only guessed correctly to one of these. How do we do this simulation multiple times? Well, if we highlight all of this stuff here, our ran betweens, or our guessing for each of the questions, and our little count if to calculate the score, if we copy this down, so again, click on that little green box there and just drag down. If we drag this down till we get to row 101, that gives us 100, that repeats that simulation 100 times. Okay, so all of these would all these numbers under the score column would be the scores that we would have on this test. So what do we want to calculate based on these scores? Well, we want to figure out the mark that we're likely to get. So let's just say the average of all of these marks. And let's also figure out how many times we pass, number of passes. So the average is pretty easy. We're going to hit, in this cell over here, we're going to hit equals, because we're using a formula, and we're just going to use our good old average formula that we've used over and over again. Open the brackets and then select this range here, going all the way down to 101, okay, and then go back up to the top and close my brackets and hit enter. So our average mark on these 100 tests is 1.8. How many times do we pass? Well, we can use the count if command again. So I'm going to put equals count if, open my brackets. Again, I got to specify a range here. So my range is going to be this column K from row 2 down to 101. So that's my 100 versions of this test. Now the criteria for passing is that we have to get 5 or above. So let's just say, quotation marks, we want the number in that score column to be greater than 4. Close our quotation marks. So if it's greater than 4, it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, and we're good. So close my brackets, hit enter. So there, I passed 6 times in these 100 trials. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there should be one more in there somewhere, 6. Okay. So there's my simulation. So I've got about a 6% chance of passing based on this simulation. Let's change this to a percent. Percentage. Okay, so to do the percentage, we are going to put a formula in here. I'm going to say equals, and then I'm just going to take whatever number is in this cell here. So I'm just going to click on that cell, N3, and take that, I'm going to divide it by 100, okay, and then I'm going to, well, multiply by 100. So it recalculates everything. Now we've got a 3% chance of passing. So it changed, that percentage of passing changes each time we update the spreadsheet as it repeats the simulation. What if we wanted to do this simulation 1,000 times? Well, that's really not hard. We can, because it's just a matter of doing the same thing we were doing before. Just copying it 1,000 times. So I'm going to select this first row here again. It's got my count ifs and my ran betweens. Click on this little green square here and drag this down until we get to row, what do we need? 1,001. So this might seem a little bit excessive, but think about it. We're doing this simulation 10 times as many times as we were doing it before, and all we really have to do is drag our mouse a little bit here. So I'm down around 700. I want to get down to 1,001, which is right there. So there we go, 1,000 simulations of my test. So to update this part up here that calculates my average, I'm going to just click on this cell here where I've got my formula. And if I go up here to the formula bar, it says I'm taking the average of all the numbers in column K from row 2 down to row 101, I'm just going to change that to 1001. Same thing with the number of passes. I've got up here in the formula bar, it says count if my range is K2 down to K101, I'm going to change that to 1001. And I'm going to keep the criteria the same, and then I'm going to hit enter. So we passed 43 times. Okay, let's change that to a percentage. Now I'm taking that value in N3, and instead of dividing by 100, I'm dividing by 1000. Okay, so it looks like the percentage of times that I'm going to pass is somewhere around 3.4, and my average mark is 1.9. So somewhere around 2 for my average. And if I wanted to, say, run the simulation again, I can just change that. That looks to be fairly consistent here at 3.5. Okay, so now it's up to 4.2% time. So in general, I mean, we're going to pass less than 5% of the time.